This is Andy Purwell for Boxing Social in association with Betfred, and I'm delighted to be joined by trainer, manager, promoter Jon Pegg over Zoom. Jon, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Andy. How are you?
Life's all good, mate. Life's all good. Obviously, it's good to catch up. A successful weekend for yourselves this past weekend, seeing Shaquam Peters lift that British title. Just obviously to go back to that and reflect on it. What are your thoughts now? We're obviously days on from it.
Well, as you know from chatting with me beforehand, I said on a couple of different interviews, if Shaq goes in there and does what he's capable of, I cannot see him losing. And that wasn't bragging or trying to get any kind of mental edge. I really couldn't see how Shaq would lose with all his advantages and where he was at and styles and stuff like that. And it proved right because Shaq went in, he boxed to the game plan that Paul Coonahan set him. He was very disciplined. His fitness was great. And he just, you know, he didn't really have to go out of, like, he didn't have to go into the top gears because once we got our nose in front, we was happy to keep it there. It's a British title. We didn't want to take any silly risks or chase something trying to look spectacular. We just wanted the belt round Shaq's waist. And like I said beforehand, if Shaq does his job, I don't think there's any domestic guys who will beat him. I think he'll be a world-class guy to beat Shaq when he's on his game. And if he can keep improving while having these 12-rounders, who knows where he's going to end up.
I spoke to Shaq earlier and Shaq said he was surprised that he didn't maybe become a bit more of a tear-up, whether that be down to just how well Shaq was boxing, so he didn't allow it to become that, or maybe Chad just couldn't engineer that type of fight. Was you surprised at all that maybe if it wasn't a bit more traded?
I think what it is, because of Shaq's record, a couple of people have pointed this out. It looks like he doesn't hit that hard because he's boxed a lot of cruiserweights. And also he's dropped people, then kind of just kept boxing them because of his advantages. And I think people don't think he hits that hard, but he does hit very hard. And like when you've got someone who's got good timing, and if you think, you know, when Chad really tried to have a little burst, he got caught in the 11th round and was really hurt. And I think when the jab's slamming home and the uppercuts are slotting in, I think boxers are in there and who know what they're doing, because Chad's an experienced guy. I think they think to themselves, if I just attack like a madman now, one, I'm going to have to wade forward through long arms, and two, it's a lot harder than it looks until you get in there. So I think Shaq's jab and his range kind of stop people making them long attacks, because it's all right letting your hands go when you're next to someone, but when you're actually well out of range, but they're still hitting you, it's really chancy to try and, you literally got to leap in. And if someone's timing the uppercuts and the short right hands nicely, nobody wants to leap onto them shots. And that's the problem with someone like Shaq. If you stay outside, he's going to pop and he's going to score and he's going to keep you there. If you go rushing forward, you've got to rush through some decent artillery to get there. And then even when you get there, who's not to say he's going to take a step back or tie you up, or, you know, so it's kind of like you've got to get him out of his stride. And if you can't get him out of his stride, which is not easy to do, you're not beating him. And I think that's what Chad found when he was in there. A game plan is okay until it comes up against a 7-foot jab, until it comes up against somebody who punches a lot harder than you thought they did, until it comes up against someone whose feet are a little bit better than they look because of how tall he is. And I think that's what happened. I think Chad had the right ideas and he's a tough, fit man. But he just come up against someone who got it right on the night and who's got his style really well tuned to his physicality. And that's what it was. I think if he could have just turned into a terrible... Well, a couple of times he tried to let his hands go and there just wasn't any success there. And he found himself getting popped. When the first uppercut that busted his lip open, that was when he was trying to storm forward underneath. And, you know, that was a really bad cut on his lip. So I think that put paid to that. So he thought, if I go underneath, he's whipping the uppercuts in. When he tried to go around the angles, Shaq's feet just kind of took him out of the way and he kept popping the jab. It was a shame because Chad didn't stop trying all night, but he was just up against, you know, the better man on the night, and his toughness and his fitness kept him in there. But like I said, if Shaq got it right, and I weren't trying to score points or trying to, like, prove a point. I said, if Shaq gets his boxing right, it doesn't matter what Chad does. if Shaq gets it right, he won't be beat. The only way Shaq was losing that fight, he got his tactics wrong, but he didn't. He got it spot on and he kept his calm.
We know that Craig Richards is the mandatory for that British title. Do you believe we would see that fight next, or do you think there's something else in the pipeline for Shaq?
Well, the fight with Richards, it has to be next unless Richards says no. The board have ordered that Shaq, the winner, had to fight Richards next. It's already been offered. We're waiting on a reply now. It's been a few days, so they're obviously thinking about it. But Richards took on Chad at 2 weeks' notice and had a real tough fight with him. I thought on the night Richards had just nicked it, but it was a hard, tough fight. They ended up in a draw, and Chad shook him up and had a war with him, and that was at 2 weeks' notice. Now, everybody knows this fight was made in March, and one thing you can't say about Chad Sugden is he doesn't train hard. So Chad's been training hard since March, as has Shaq. So Shaq got like the best Chad Sugden in front of him. He got a kid who's had full preparation, plenty of time to get ready. Hennessy Sports was more than fair with him, give him all the notice, even told him when it was a possibility. And Shaq, some people didn't give Chad a round. I give him a round and a share of one. But this is a man who Richard struggled with at 2 weeks' notice. And Richards hasn't boxed since then. I know he's got one lined up. But Richard's got to be looking and thinking, man, he's hitting a real good bit of form, and I'm not. I think we're not going to hear a reply until Richards has had his fight. But obviously, Mick's going to push to get the fight nailed down for the date he wants. But I think unless Richards looks sensational in his fight that he's got lined up, I think he's going to take his world ranking and take another route, which I wouldn't blame him, because at domestic level, if there was a guy that I had a higher ranking than and he was 6'6", very effective, just hitting form, having his first 12 rounder and looking good doing it against sorry mate, someone rang me. If I was against someone who was 6'6", just hitting form and just had a 12 rounder against a guy I struggled with, I'd be careful myself, to be honest. And if I had a high world ranking, like he has, I think, with the WBA, I don't know if I'd be chasing it. I don't know, perhaps he wants the British title, because that's the title everyone wants to win. That's why we didn't go in the golden contract, because Shaq really wanted the Lonsdale belt. We had the chance to go in the golden contract, but we wanted the Lonsdale belt, and so did Shaq, so we chased it. But who's to know what Richards is going to do? He's got to do what's best for him. But we're very confident now. We was confident anyway. But after getting the 12 rounds under Shaq's belt and the way he performed, we're even more confident now. So the offer's been made. They're mulling it over. Mick Hennessy will chase it up. We'll know in a couple of days, I expect.
What do you see Shaq doing with regards to a British title? Do you think he will go on to look to win it outright, or do you think maybe one or two defences before moving on to better pastures?
If you're making two defences and you've already made your mandatory, which is what we've got to do, you'd be daft not to slam in the third defence, because winning the Lonsdale belt outright, apart from winning a world title, is probably the best thing you can do in boxing. You've got that wonderful belt for keeps. So it is definitely on our mind for Shaq to win it outright. Two reasons. One, Shaq is still relatively inexperienced, and there's some very good guys out there. But I think by the time Shaq's got 3 12-rounders under his belt, we'll be ready to mix it up, even with the very good guys. At the moment, if he jumps straight in, he'd be at a disadvantage with 1 12-rounder under his belt. And two, we want to win the belt outright. Shaq does. We do as a team. And if we're going to have the mandatory in our very first fight and mix giving Shaq his full backing, we'll be going for 2 fast voluntary defences. We'll be fast-tracking. If we get that mandatory out the way first, we'll be looking to get it done. So that'll be the plan, and that'll be the route we're looking to take. But it's boxing. Who knows what route we're going to take? Who knows which way we're going to have to go? But we're in a good position. We've got the belt round our waist. We haven't got to chase anyone. We've got a top promoter, Mick Hennessy, who really believes in building fighters up. We've got Shaq on terrestrial TV. He was watched by over 1 million people on the weekend, which we was amazed by. But Hennessy Sports tells us that's kind of low because it was the first one back. So we're in a great position, mate. We've done a deal to get lads on the undercard of Channel 5 on all the future shows. I'm matching the shows for Hennessy Sports. So, you know, we've kind of we fell into a good position from a bad position with the pandemic. We fell into a position that we're quite happy with, and we're not going to rush, but we're going to get the job done.
Just to move off Shaq and just touch on Casey Benjamin, we know Casey was due to fight on the card. He couldn't in the end, but can you just kind of expand on that and reasons behind it?
Yeah, Casey was looking really good, and he just got a touch of food poisoning, or might have been just a bad stomach. But we've made the mistake in the past, Andy, of putting guys in when they're 70% because we don't want to let fans down, we don't want to let promoters down. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But people are very unforgiving when it doesn't. And we don't make excuses anyway. But, you know, you can have 20 wins and you take a fight when you're not very well and you lose, and all people talk about is that one loss. So we've kind of learned as a team that, you know, even though you pull out of a fight, there's another one 2 months down the line. Whereas if you have a bad loss, it can put you a year or two behind. And in some people's minds, you're never a good fighter again. So we didn't want to have to do that, but we pushed it as far as we could. We didn't want to let Conor down, and I was glad that Conor still got to fight on the TV show and got a really good win and people talking about him because he'd done nothing wrong. And the other team were gentlemen. They realise, you know, they know us. They know we're not pulling someone out for silly reasons or a joke. And they didn't badmouth or anything like that. They just says, great, let's get it on in a few months. And they were great about it. But yeah, we've learned our lessons in putting people in when they're not 100%. You know, there's always little niggles. That's part of boxing. But if they're not quite right, especially in a tough fight like you would have with Conor Walker, we've learned that you've got to be right because it's a very unforgiving game. And nobody gives you any medals for being brave and taking a fight when you're 80%. But they'll all give you plenty of stick for doing it. And if you tell them about it, then you're just a whiner. So we don't tell them about it. So we pulled him out. Casey didn't want to pull out. But me, Soggy and Louis made the decision to pull him out. And hopefully that fight will be made for Hennessy's November the 14th show. So like I say, it's not too far away and we can still do it.
Moving on, John, touch on Sam Eggington, the Savage. How has he been since obviously the first fight camp show and his defeat to Ted Cheeseman?
I've spoke to him almost every day and I've seen him a couple of times. He's back in the gym next week. But he's just annoyed. Like, you know, the screens went up on the commentators the week after Sam's fight. And like Sam says, there was a couple of champions who got draws or home guys who got draws. And, you know, and they kept their titles in close fights that was controversial. And he says, I had so many people saying that they thought I won it. He says, I know Cheeseman had a lot saying he thought he won it. He says, but, you know, I was 3 points down on 2 cards. He says, that's just ridiculous. It's really stung him, the fact that he needed 3 knockdowns in the last round to get a draw. It's made him think, what have I got to do to get a points win? He hasn't moaned about it, but I says to him, perhaps you should. I says, because Sky made such a fuss about how unlucky Ted had been in the last couple of fights. And they kept mentioning how he deserved a bit of luck and how his luck needed to turn round. I says, perhaps you should mention your bad luck rather than taking it on the chin. But the plus points are, Sam showed some boxing that a lot of people thought he didn't possess, especially in the second half. He showed a lot of ring intelligence. He showed he's still a learning fighter. He mixed it up at light middle with a strong kid, because a lot of people were saying, oh, he's not strong enough, he's a welterweight, stuff like that. And he showed he was the stronger fighter against a very good, strong kid. A lot of people had him winning, so who knows what's going to happen. Sam's proven time and time again that he'll come back and shake it off. You know, I don't know how many times he can keep doing it, but he's. I think you're still going to see the best of him. I think this will perhaps anger him and drive him on a little bit more. I don't know if he gets another decision like that, if it'll happen again, but he'll get there, and we've got our faith in him, because apart from the decision, I was very happy in how he boxed. You know, I was very happy in what he did. You know, he was a 3-1 underdog. A lot of people was picking him to get outclassed and chinned. you know, not many people have picked him to do a job on points. And afterwards, a lot of people had him winning on points, a lot of very good judges. So, you know, he's been there before. He's been wrote off. We'll be looking to get him out. We'll be picking his fights. You never know. You might see him on one of Shaquam's undercards. You know, Sam can box anywhere. We've had a couple of offers from abroad, but they weren't very good. I think they thought he must be desperate after a loss or he'd be desperate for money, but we've turned those down. But, you know, Sam, we haven't lost any belief in him. I think he's a little bit kind of annoyed at the moment. He's a little bit, what am I meant to do? I show the boxing that people say I'm not capable of. And people talk about, oh, he hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. I mean, look, some of the rounds are very close, but you'll never get Sam getting a round scored where he's won it behind the jab because they just don't expect it of him. Commentators, judges, they've got used to the Savage being slam bang and overwhelming people. Like, the way Shaq won the fight the other night, very carefully behind the jab, slotting shots in, judges wouldn't score them rounds for Sam because they're expecting more of him. If Sam ain't, like, totally dominant or roaring away, throwing combinations, it seems like they won't give him a scoreline behind the jab or being clever and boxing. Yet everyone knocks him for not boxing. But when he does show a bit of boxing, nobody scores a round for him. But no, Sam will be back before the end of the year, no doubt. He'll be back in the ring, and we're going to keep improving, keep working on the stuff that he's slowly improving. Sorry, mate, it's a manager asking about a fight. It's the same person every time. Yeah, Sam will be back in before the end of the year, and we'll see where he goes from there, mate.
What do you expect Sam to kind of do for the remainder of this year with regards to opponents? Who do you expect him to get in the ring with? Do you expect to see that Ted Cheeseman rematch? You know, at fight camp we also saw Anthony Fowler and Kieran Conway box as well. Who do you see Sam getting in the ring with?
The Cheeseman rematch would be a great fight. It's not really been talked about since. It sounds watsy, but I don't know if I really want to put Sam in with one of the fellow kind of matchroom prospects because Sky doesn't treat Sam like he's a fellow prospect. I mean, they called him a gatekeeper and stuff like that. And, like, they was talking about Cheeseman like he's the man on the way up. He's only a year younger than Sam. And I'm just, you know, I think Sam's at a disadvantage. Sky don't see him as a prospect. They see him as someone to go in the away corner. They've actually, you know, that's been said. It's been said by them live on air. So in a close fight, when people are talking about the other guy, about how he needs to win and how he's going forward, and then they're talking about your guy, well, you know, Sam's come back from losses before. We know he can do it. It doesn't seem very, it doesn't say, that's not a position I want him to be in. I want it to be totally, it's, you know, people was talking about, oh, there's no bias, but you got to feel for Ted. He's had bad luck. And I'm like, well, there's your bias right there. And I want to be, you know, boxing shouldn't be scored on someone having supposed bad luck in the last fight. When a fight starts, it should be a blank canvas. From the first bell to the last bell is what you score the fight on. You shouldn't be mentioning about, oh, well, this will happen and that's happened. Sam's had a lot of bad luck. It's just that he doesn't moan about it. And I'm starting to believe that perhaps you need to moan about it. Sometimes it makes me think it's a bit like X Factor, you know, where you got to have a sob story to get the judges on your side. But because Sam's just an old school throwback who goes in there, win or lose, does not say a word, gets on with it, pats the other geezer on the back, does the interview afterwards. I mean, how many times have you seen people refusing interviews after a loss? You know, Sam was gutted the other night that he got the loss. He really believed he'd won, as did a lot of people. Straight away, totally professional. He'd done the interview. There was no storming off, no throwing his dummy out the pram. You know, and that should be what's kind of admired, but it seems not to be rewarded. It seems the people who moan get the benefit of the doubt next time. I don't know. So, yeah, so I don't know if I'd put him in with, like, another kind of fellow kind of up-and-comer because, like I say, it was actually says afterwards, oh, well, Sam's a gatekeeper now. You know, you're talking about someone who's just won a title in Italy and who's just lost a really close, controversial decision. Oh, that makes him a gatekeeper. Why are other people not gatekeepers when they have losses? And, you know, we're encouraged to kind of have 50-50 fights. People are saying, oh, it should be more 50-50s. You should do this. Now, Sam's had more 50-50s than anyone in the country. Now, law of averages, if you have loads of 50-50s, you're going to have some losses. Now, you have lots of 50-50s and you lose some, you become a gatekeeper. That's saying to people, don't take 50-50s because you will be wrote off. Because if they truly are 50-50s, you have 6 of them, you're going to lose 3. 3 losses and you're wrote off. So how can you encourage people like the UFC do to have good fights and reward them for it when they do have good fights and you lose some because you're having good fights, you get kind of thrown to the bottom of the pile and, you know, it's made out that, you know, you're there to lose. So, yeah, the Cheeseman rematch would be welcomed. I don't think it's going to happen. I've got a feeling it won't happen. As for the others, I'm not sure. I don't know. The good thing about Sam is that, you know, that exciting. Already we've had 3 offers. And we're picking and choosing because we're looking what to do. But there's not a TV station on the planet who, win or lose, wouldn't want Sam Eggington on a show. Because boxing's the entertainment business. No matter how you look at it, success-wise, it's the entertainment business. And TV channels need people to watch. And people are going to tune in to watch someone like Sam. Win or lose, you've seen the comments on his Twitter afterwards. Wouldn't matter how many fights you lost, I want to watch when you're on the bill. So Sam will always have offers. So, you know, perhaps we've got to be a bit more choosy about what we pick for him, where we go, stuff like that. Perhaps we've got to be a bit smarter than fighting London guys in London. But we just believe in getting in there and fighting and see what happens. But you have to be a bit cynical sometimes.
John, I know you've been very vocal about the commentary situation throughout fight camp and certainly for Sam's fight with Ted. A couple of things I want to pick up on, and this will kind of link in with Whyte-Povetkin that I'll come on to after this question. But after Sam's fight with Ted, we sort of brought in the Perspex screens for the following weeks. Do you believe that would have made any difference for Sam's fight if I was there on the night with regards to judges being able to hear commentary, what have you?
Well, I think so, yeah. I think so because everybody who watched it on TV gives Sam the first round. Even people who didn't watched it back properly and give him the first round. None of the judges did, and the commentary didn't. That first round could have been the difference in the fight. And everyone had him winning the first round, but none of the judges did who were within earshot. And it was a close round, but none of the judges did, and the commentary didn't. And if there was no point about the glass screens and the commentary, Sky would not spend money and kind of concede the point publicly and put the screens up. Because we had a debate about it and they defended themselves and I made my point. And, you know, it was just a point, an opinion. As soon as the screens went up, I was like, well, I was right. That's what, and I'm not saying it's anything wrong with it. I'm not saying commentators, it's purely opinion based. I've never had a problem. Commentators can think what they like. But on the night, in a close fight, when it just goes against us and there's close rounds being talked about that we've lost, I honestly think it would have made a difference. You know, I just think it would have. You know, some of them close rounds can be influenced. We've all done it. You must have watched a fight and scored it one way, then watched it back with the sound off and thought, I've scored it slightly different here. I've done it. I'm a pretty good judge of boxing. And I've watched it back without the sound on. And that's nothing to do with the commentators, you know, having any kind of agenda. That's just, they might have a bias for some reason. Like I say, when you're talking about Ted's had all his bad luck, subconsciously you've got a bias straight away. You're doing it without thinking. Now, if you've got a bias, that's fair enough if it's having no effect. I don't care if you're cheering for him. But when I think it might affect the people listening, and in that garden, you could clearly hear it. And like I say, nobody can say they haven't scored a fight differently when they've had the sound totally down. Or if they've got 2 people either side who's a fan of someone, you would lean towards that person by the end of the fight if it's close. And I think that's what happened. And the screens went up, you know. The screens went up. And like, I was getting a bit of stick online, and I knew them screens was going up. And I says, why have the screens gone up then if I've got no points? And the stick just stopped. Because how do you answer that? If I've got no points about the commentators having an effect, and Adam Smith even said it, he even says, oh, well, we've been told that the boxers and judges could hear us. So, and which is fair enough. It's just that it's bad enough that we had to put up with it to find out. But I felt totally vindicated when the screens went up. And like I say, I weren't having to go at anyone. I was sticking up for my guy. I'm not saying there was any conspiracy. It's like, if something happens that goes against your guy that's not quite right or not fair, you talk about it. I'm not saying it was done on purpose or if it was a conspiracy. I'm just saying the circumstances put us in a bit of bad luck. You know what I mean? And I still believe that now. But, the screens went up. Hopefully it helped the scoring maybe be a little bit better. Maybe, perhaps me bringing it up. I'm just saying, I'm not saying judges would listen to someone, but I'm saying subconsciously, if you're in a room of supporters shouting for one guy and you're in the middle of them, it's easy to give the closer rounds to the guy they're shouting for. That's that was my point.
Just to link it in then with Whyte-Povetkin this past weekend, certainly after the fight, there was a lot of comments over social media with regards to the commentary. What did you make of the commentary for the past weekend? Talks of, again, people just saying it was biased and what have you.
Do you know what? It's really hard because the Sky team are very closely linked to Matchroom because they do interviews, they speak to the fighters. The Matchroom team are around more, stuff like that. And it's really hard when you're watching someone to not notice something a little bit more. It's like when you're watching a friend box. You notice every shot he lands, then you watch it back on video and you think, oh, and it's really hard not to. But there is, there is a little bit of bias there. And people are pointing it out because I think that's why sometimes when you get a totally like neutral commentator from another country, people don't like it either way. But people have a moan. But I think you'd be daft to say there's not a little bit of bias there. I just think there is, and I don't think it's nasty or an agenda. Like Richie Woodall actually says on one of his commentary things when he was commentating at the Olympics, he says, "I'll call it as clear as I can." He says, "But I want the British guys to win." He says, He says, "I'm a patriot." He says, "I want the British guys to win." He says, "I will call it." He says, "And I'll say if they're losing." He says, "But I will be positive towards them." And, the Sky team, a part of Matchroom, really. I know they're separate with Sky, but Sky's got an exclusive deal with Matchroom. They're part of the same kind of team, aren't they? If you say Sky Boxing, you don't think of somewhere else, do you? You think of Matchroom. So I don't think it's like an agenda or it's kind of there. I just think they know them. And when I've done a bit of commentary on shows, the away guys always love it. When I've done some on Steve Wood shows and that. Because I know the away guys, I go out my way to really give them a little build-up and talk about them because I know them quite well. And the away guys always say to me, "Oh, nobody else ever mentions us." So when the Sky team know these guys well, I'm probably friends with them, it's hard. It's hard not to. It's hard. And it can even go the other way. When Matt says to me, when he was commentating for Frankie, Gavin and Sam, and a few people says he was like really commentating for Frankie, like giving him a lot of praise. And he says, because we're such good friends, he says, I didn't want it to appear like I'm being biased towards you, and ended up leaning the other way. And there's all these kind of little foibles in there that the team have got to deal with. And that's why the like real legendary commentators are remembered 30 years later, because it's not an easy job. It's a job that can be done well if you do a good job, and most of them do it great. But the guys who are the ones that everyone still remembers years later, because they was like genuine one-offs who just kind of, and I don't think I could do it. I'm not sitting here when I moan about them. It's like when I moan about refs. I'd never want to be a ref. I don't think I could do their job. Sorry, mate. You can tell there's a show coming up, can't you? They don't fucking stop. Yeah, like I'll moan about a ref, but I also try and praise a ref because I could never be a ref. And it's like with commentators, we have a moan about them, and I try and point out when they do a good job as well, because they do a great job most of the time. I'd never want to be a commentator. It's as hard as being a ref, to be honest. But yeah, I think there is bias there, and I think that's shown because, it was like Povetkin was ignored for a couple of rounds, and I just think, I don't know how you fix it, because I don't know how I'd fix it, because I don't think I could do it either. But they've got to take the criticism on board. When I was speaking to Andy Scott, and I says, Andy, I said, if it was you saying to me it was okay and it was me saying it was wrong, I says, I wouldn't even mention it. I says, but there's an awful lot of boxing people who who probably want to be in Sky's favour more than mine, who have got the same opinion as me and are saying it quite vocally. I said, they're not saying it for fun. I said, this is your audience. I said, when you go into a restaurant, it says on the wall, the audience is, well, the customer's always right. I says, when you've got boxing people who you can track down and talk to saying something, they're not saying it for no reason or to be nasty. I said, they're probably friends with the commentators. I says, so really, they could stay silent and stay friends with everyone. I says, but they're saying something because they're seeing it. So, but they've got a good team overall and they do a great job. But I think there is something there to be improved. What's your opinion on it?
To be fair, whenever I'm listening to the commentary, I kind of I zone in on the fight, so it doesn't really ever affect me. And if I see things, I can just turn it down. Like, I think it's different from my perspective because I'm not involved to the.
Would you ever agree with some of the comments? You know, when you see the comments on Twitter, do you think to yourself, I can see what these people are on about?
I can see where things are coming from, and I understand where you've come from, John, when you talk about how judges can be influenced by commentary because of a gap and from what can be said. Like, I do see why that could happen, but when I'm watching it, I either just zone in or I'll have it silent just so I can focus on it.
Yeah. No, it's a tricky thing because without commentary, it's not as good a fight. And good commentary, like a Paulie Malignaggi, he adds to the fight. You look forward to Paulie analysing what the corners said. And I remember when I had a fighter fighting when Al Bernstein was commentating, and it felt like a real honour to have him commentating on our fight. And so good commentary absolutely adds to it. Bad commentary is very rare, but really ruins it. And then you have like the little moments where people get pissed off. I think people get pissed off too much. But I think if a lot of people who are involved in the game are saying something, I think they need to just adjust. Because if loads of people saying that a boxer is doing something wrong, usually it's because the boxer's doing something wrong. Do you know what I mean? Whether the boxer changes it or not, it's up to them. Like everybody says about Sam not moving his head. We know that's wrong, and we're trying to get him while dropping his hands. Not when he drops his hands, because everyone's saying it, it probably means it's right. Do you know what I mean? And it is right. So when everyone's mentioning the commentary, I'm kind of like, there's a reason why people are mentioning the commentary. So perhaps things need to be fixed up in a certain way, or I don't know. It's a hard job. It's like being a referee. You got to do what you think's best and hope that it's right. But there's plenty of people judging you on it.
Just to move away from that, John, and obviously touch on the headline fight for the last fight cap bill of Whyte-Povetkin, a stunning uppercut and finish from Alexander in that 5th round. What did you make of their fight, obviously up until the point of the stoppage and then the knockout itself?
Whyte was doing his job, but there's always a slightly vulnerable look about Whyte because he's so vicious with his own shots and really wants to put some hurt on the guy. There's always a chance he's going to get caught. And if you look on Boxing Social's predictions, did you see mine?
I did indeed.
I don't want to say I picked him points, but I just thought Povetkin was going to roll the dice and come up with something. I think I was the only one who picked him. So I had an inkling. I don't think on the section that they put up, I was the only one on that section. But I just don't think you can get rid of a trainer like Mark Tibbs so close to a fight and not feel something. I just don't think it's possible. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I picked him mainly. Although the shot was beautiful. When people saying it was a lucky shot, just don't realise that 40-year-olds don't throw lucky shots. They save every shot to make sure they count, and they make that 40-year-olds are very economic. They're not throwing wild lucky shots. And also, you don't throw a lucky left uppercut. You know what I mean? A left uppercut is a shot that you've lined up. But he was winning the fight well, and he was boxing well. But there's always a sense of danger with Dillian because anyone who really wants to take the other guy out is always at risk himself. A lot of people are jumping up and saying, "Oh, just get the rematch, he'll beat him up." He should do, but your man's just been knocked out cold with a single shot. Sometimes you don't recover from that in your very next fight. You don't always recover. Dillian Whyte's got the mindset too. But I'm not sure whether you're just going to jump straight back in and be as good as you was. That self-confidence that's built over years of good wins and proving yourself and doing the job, it's got to be punctured a little bit by a loss, especially a bad knockout loss. You got to be Superman, or you got to be Lennox Lewis against Hassan Rahman to be able to come back from a knockout loss and just turn it round. And, you know, I don't think Dillian is Lennox Lewis. I don't think he's as calm. I don't think he's as thoughtful. And not many people can just turn it round so easy. So we'll have to see. But it shook it up, didn't it? It certainly ended fight camp with a bang and a bit of controversy.
No, 100%, John. Final thing before I let you go, somebody you know well, Dick Spelman, obviously sharing a ring with Shaquam Peters previously. He's got another fight lined up with Anthony Yarde. I'm sure somebody who maybe down the line Shaq could well share a ring with. What are your thoughts on that battle, Anthony Yarde versus Dick Spelman?
It's a very tough fight, but Deck's as hard as nails, and Lyndon Arthur's a serious puncher. And, you know, Shaq can bang a bit, and none of them really dented Deck. And he's going straight in from another camp. Yarde's had a win since Kovalev, hasn't he? He had like a blowover job somewhere abroad. I don't know how good that will have done him. I think Yarde will be looking, because they've caught Deck straight after a tough fight, to maybe improve on the Lyndon Arthur fight and maybe force a late stoppage or bust him up or something like that. But he might, you know, you might see some boxing. Because I'll tell you one thing, Deck's toughness showed me a side of Lyndon Arthur's boxing I didn't know he possessed. So you might actually see Anthony Yarde, he's a good fighter and he's got a clever trainer. You might see him go, this guy's really tough. I'm gonna practice my boxing. You know, I can box a bit with him because Deck's more of a fighter than a boxer. And after a couple of rounds, you might see Anthony Yarde do what Lyndon Arthur done and says, you know what, I'm going to use my skills. This guy's super tough, and having a brawl with him, I might get him, but I might fucking get into a fight I don't want to be in. But Deck's a tough man, and as long as he ain't feeling too much aches and pains off the Lyndon Arthur fight, I think he'll give a really sterling effort and give Yarde a tough fight. But I think Yarde will look a little bit more impressive than Lyndon Arthur because of the timing. Whether he'll get a late stoppage or win on points, I'm not sure. But you can't write Dick Spelman off. He's a tough man. If you go in there thinking you'll blow him over, he's a recipe for trouble. But I don't think Yarde will do that. I don't think he'd go in there underprepared, whoever it is. But if somebody does, like Lyndon Arthur showed me something I didn't know he had, and that was because he took Dick Spelman totally seriously. But, you know, I think he'll give Yarde a good fight, and I think that'll set up a real humdinger with Yarde and Lyndon Arthur.
John, we will leave that there now, and I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. As always,
I'll be catching up all them calls that I've missed. That's what I'll be doing.
John, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. I appreciate you giving up some time. Stay safe, and I will see you soon. Thank you for speaking.
See you soon, mate. See you, mate. Bye.